He had been watching her for a couple of weeks, and in that time, he had memorized her entire daily routine. 7:30 a.m., wake up and shower. 8 a.m., head to Starbucks for a disgusting cup of sugary syrup and a splash of milk and just a hint of coffee. 8:30 a.m., arrive at the office. 11:45 a.m., lunch. A salad at her desk, except on Wednesdays. That's when she meets the black chick from HR at the cafe across the street for a little girl talk, and so on. It hadn't have been hard. He noticed almost immediately that she was a slave to her ways, the type of person that didn't typically deviate from her schedule, which was fine by him. Her predictable habits had made planning her murder practically effortless. He checked the time on his watch as he pulled the stolen sedan up in front of her townhouse that night. 10:35 p.m. That meant she had just finished watching television for the evening. Probably one of those shitty reality shows she DVRs, he thought to himself. If he had to venture a guess, he would have said she was brushing her teeth right about then. In 10 minutes, she'd be in the shower, and after that, it was bedtime. Except he managed to smile. She wasn't going to make it to bed. Just a few more minutes and all his careful planning would finally come to fruition. He let his fingers slip down between his legs. His cock had gotten hard in anticipation. He told himself that she deserved what she was about to get. All of his victims had. Sure, none of the women he had raped and murdered had ever done anything to cross him directly. But that didn't matter. They were the type of females that sickened him. Promiscuous sluts in their late 20s or early 30s that claimed they were too wrapped up in their careers for a serious relationship. Dumb bronze who considered themselves independent women. Skanks who wore overpriced designer blouses and carried obscenely expensive Michael Kors handbags wherever they went. Grown-ass women who idolized the geriatric whores from Sex and the City. Women like her didn't even notice guys like him, but it wasn't like she was too busy to meet men. In the 3 weeks that he had been stalking her, she had hooked up with 2 different fellas. They seemed like real douchebags too. The type of guys who used dating apps and wore too much Axe body spray. The fact that she fucked a man like that made him hate her all the more. His watch now said 10:47 p.m. She would be in the shower by now. 10:45 to 11:02. Those were the golden minutes, his window of opportunity. He decided that that was the best time to break into her place, was while she was busy washing. He thought about her tits for a minute, and what they must look like up close. Again, he reached his hand down to his crotch, this time gripping it tightly. Somehow his cock was even harder. He popped the car's driver's side door open then and headed around to the back of the house. It had rained pretty hard earlier that day, and now the air was unusually fresh. He swore he could smell the ocean even though it was 8 miles away. Part of him wished the weather hadn't cleared up. There was something peaceful about the sound of heavy rain to him, as if it drowned out the ear-splitting roar of existence and brought a few brief hours of harmony to the world. The lot in the back of her townhouse was so small, he felt he could stretch out his arms and touch the fence lining each side of it. There was a fake rock sitting underneath the yard's one rose bush. It stuck out like a sore thumb. Inside was a key to the patio door. He knew it would be there because he had watched her use it before. But even if he hadn't, he surmised it wouldn't have taken long to find the obtrusive thing. Dumb bitch, he whispered to himself. You think someone couldn't tell this rock was fake? Dumb bitch like you deserves to get your skull fucked. He bent over and removed the key from the faux rock's tiny compartment. Then slowly, quietly, he unlocked the patio door and stepped inside. He was in the kitchen now, The shower was running. He could hear it as soon as he entered the townhouse. So far, everything had gone just as he expected. But this wasn't a surprise to him. After all, he had been preparing weeks for this night. He always planned his kills meticulously. The last place he wanted to go was prison. Most serial killers were in there for the fame. They left clues and calling cards so that they could be read about in the paper. They wanted the talking heads to argue about them on TV. And when they got caught, they wanted to be celebrities. Not him. He only wanted to maim and torture as many stuck-up skanks as possible. Getting arrested would ruin all the fun, and he had barely just begun to play. The woman in the shower would be his 9th victim, but there were more that needed to die. So many more. Half the human race if need be. He floated through the kitchen and into her living room. The shag carpet squished underneath the wet soles of his shoes as he walked across it. He moved through the shadowy house like a phantom. The darkness was his domain, and he was the monster hiding in it. The sound of the shower was louder now. It was coming from the 2nd level. He stopped at the base of the staircase and peered up. A yellow light was seeping out beneath the door to the upstairs bathroom. That famous scene from Psycho bled into his mind. He supposed jumping in the shower was a little cliche, but at least he wasn't going to be using a knife. No. He preferred to choke the life out of women. It got him off. Besides, it's not like he was dressed in drag like fucking Norman Bates. He crept up the stairs as silently as possible. There was no need to check his manhood a 3rd time. He knew it would be ready to give it to her when the time came. Excitement was beginning to surge inside him, but as soon as he got to the door, a sudden twinge of panic shot through his body. The door. What if it was locked? He had just assumed it wouldn't be since she lived alone, but that didn't make it a sure thing. If she heard him trying to fiddle with the doorknob, then she might scream. All the townhouses in that neighborhood were packed so close together. Hers even shared a wall with another one, and the people living in the adjacent building would easily be able to hear her cries for help. Even if no one called the cops, people would be looking out their windows to see who came out of her house. Maybe even snapping pictures of him on their camera phones. And what if they got a clear shot? The police would catch him for sure once her body was discovered, and then his playtime would be over. How could he have been so careless? He thought about turning around and heading back down the stairs. There was always tomorrow. If he was quiet about it, he could just come back. Then something else skipped through his mind. The man from the grocery store 2 days prior. The one she had been giving fuck-me eyes to at the check stand. Weeks he had been tailing her and she hadn't once looked his way. But that slimy prick in the sleeveless t-shirt sure got her attention easily. She was probably in there right now thinking about him. No, he decided to himself. She doesn't get to finish that fantasy. He wrapped his fingers around the doorknob. The metal felt like ice against his skin. The sensation of his heart beating wildly in his chest was tremendously apparent to him. He took a deep inhale, and if the knob didn't turn, he would break the door down. With a little bit of luck, he could crash into the bathroom and grab her around the throat before she could let out a shout. He twisted his wrist a half-inch to the left, and the knob spun with it. Success. A triumphant sigh emerged from his mouth. All of his worrying had been for nothing. The door was unlocked. He cursed himself for his stupid mistake, then turned the doorknob the rest of the way and slinked inside. The shower sounded so loud, like snow on an old analog television when the speaker's volume turned all the way up. The air was so thick inside the steamy bathroom he could practically chew it. Cautiously he stepped, taking care not to slip on the slick tiles wet with condensation. He moved slowly but with purpose, concentrating only on his target. His dick was practically ready to burst through his jeans. Her opaque, beige shower curtain had a pink flowery design stitched into it. It was the kind of tasteless garbage he figured a woman like hers would hang up in her bathroom. His focus was keener than ever. Closer he stalked, and now he was standing directly in front of it. He extended a hand out towards the shower curtain, but felt himself recoil before touching it. Something was off. The shower was running, like the rainfall earlier that day had dominated his ears. But this time, he didn't find it comforting. He had come to the realization that made his stomach drop. Aside from the sound of the all-too-steady stream spraying from the shower head, there was no other noises coming from the other side of the curtain. No singing, no splashing, no sound of water occasionally sloshing around the bottom of the tub. No, nothing. It was as if he was alone in the bathroom. But then why was the shower running? He glanced at his watch. It read 10:58. She had to have been in there. In 3 weeks, she hadn't finished a shower before 11:02. Had he missed her? The shower's roar seemed almost maddening now. He stood in front of it, listening, waiting to hear something, anything emerge from the other side of the curtain. But nothing ever did. With a shaky hand, he reached for the hanging fabric barrier, gripped it firmly. Then, in a quick, sudden motion, he jerked it back. The woman was indeed in the shower. Her eyes wide and gleaming, they sparkled with terror. Her panicked face looked as if she was readying a scream, except he knew it wouldn't come. How could it? She was already dead, a naked, bloody heap at the bottom of the tub. Someone else had gotten to her before him, and by the look of it, they didn't seem to mind movie cliches. Her killer had mangled her with a knife. Each of her toes and fingers had been sliced clean off, and her legs and stomach were riddled with deep cuts and gashes. For a moment he wondered if she was still alive while her assailant had been riddling her flesh. He looked away, trying to divert his eyes. That's when he saw the pink gelatinous lump laying next to the drain. He stared curiously at it. To him it looked like a bloody soaked jellyfish. It wasn't until he glanced back at the woman that he realized her murderer had carved one of her breasts from her chest and left it in the tub for him like some sort of grotesque Easter egg. He hadn't planned for this. He had taken almost everything into account, but he hadn't planned for this. Fright's razor-sharp talons sunk themselves into his chest. He turned to leave, but stopped abruptly in his tracks when he saw the mirror. There was a message written on it, a string of crimson letters smeared across the glass's surface. He had been so focused on the shower earlier that he hadn't even noticed it. He read the words. It was short and brief, but it had sent a horrible feeling of dread through his entire being because, and this was something he was for sure of, the message was written for him.
Right on time.
The humidity of the bathroom was making him woozy. It was an odd sensation that steamy heat coming off of the shower in combination with his dizzy head made everything feel unreal, almost as if he was experiencing a bizarre fever dream. He opened the door. A wave of cool air crashed against his face. With it came a heavy dose of reality. It hadn't been an accident that the woman he had been following was murdered the very same night he decided to make his move. No. The killer had even sent him a message. The entire time he had been stalking her, someone had been stalking him. While he had been planning her death, someone had been planning his. He didn't run out of the bathroom, he galloped. It seemed like the staircase had somehow moved 100 feet down the hall. The shadows were no longer his to hide in. They had a new monster, and it was coming for him. His legs stopped working as soon as he reached the top of the stairs, causing him to collapse onto the banister. With all of his strength, he hoisted himself up to his feet. What had happened? A couple seconds later, a searing pain in his back answered that question. He reached behind and felt something sticking out of it, like a cold metallic cyst that had suddenly sprouted from his spine. There was a pressure pushing down on the back of his head now, a hand forcing him into a helpless position, doubling him over the banister. For a second it felt like he was levitating as he dangled precariously, looking down towards the living room floor 15 feet below. Then came another searing pain, even worse than the first. Slowly his assailant had begun to pull the knife from his body. It felt as if his wound was being defiled, as if someone had just finished using it the same way he used his victims. How big was this blade? How deep had it been buried? It seemed like it took forever to remove. Once it was finally out, he could feel the hallway's cool, drafty air add insult to his injury as it licked at the gaping gash in his back. He tried to get back to his feet, but before he could, someone snagged a hold of his ankles. In an instant, he was toppling over the handrail. The living room spun around him as he fell down to the floor. He landed on his shoulder with a thud and let out a groan. There was no doubt in his mind that it was dislocated. He gazed up and saw a figure of a man crawling down the stairs on all fours like an animal. And he wondered for the second time if he was dreaming. The only thing he could make out was his pursuer's bushy hair, blacker than midnight and as wild as a savage. Desperate questions streamed through his head. What is that? Jesus Christ, what the hell is that thing? He watched silently as the man or animal or thing that had attacked him reached the bottom step and stood up on 2 feet, uncurling his spine like a cobra, dancing for a snake charmer. The shaggy head of dark matted hair turned in his direction, and now he could see a face. A human face, or at least one that used to belong to a human. His stalker wore a skeleton smile, no lips, and a set of flat white teeth that contrast bitterly against purple gums. Like a rotting corpse, it had no nose, and its pallid complexion looked snow white in the moonlight seeping into the living room. In its hand, it held an 8-inch Bowie knife coated in blood. It began to slither towards him again, watching him through a pair of bulging yellow eyes. It almost looked as if it were wearing a person like a Halloween costume, a teenager or a young man perhaps. It was dressed in black pants and a white hooded sweatshirt that had been tie-dyed in the blood of the woman in the bathroom. He tried to get up, but it put a foot on his chest and pinned him to the ground, then crouched on top of him and placed the point of the knife up against his abdomen. He barely felt it penetrate his stomach, but as the blade turned inside him, a blazing hot sensation swelled throughout his core. He stared back into the ugly thing's unblinking eyes. As his vision started fading to black, the last thing he heard was its horrible, croaky voice, just as repulsive as its face.
Go to sleep.
It groaned. He decided not to fight it, so he closed his eyes and let the darkness take him. The first time I remember feeling true fear was in front of that tree, an old decaying thing standing right in the center of an otherwise flat field on my grandparents' land. Its long trunk twisted and knotted around itself, its branches reaching out like gnarled hands towards gray skies as if it were in prayer. It was just a tree and nothing more. At least that's what my father told me. I knew though. I knew better than that. It was not just a tree. It was evil. Even back then I noticed that something wasn't right about it. It was as if grass refused to grow in a 5-foot wide circle around it. It was like none of the animals would approach it. You never saw a squirrel or a bird nestled among its black and dead branches. I can remember standing in front of it at the age of 6. My father and grandfather standing behind me, talking as I stared up in a frightened awe.
That thing's an eyesore, Pop.
My father said, taking a few steps towards me.
Why don't you just cut that damn thing down already?
My grandfather, a man still quite fit at that age and still sporting some of the original dark color of his hair, balked at this.
Thing's been there for as long as I can remember. Besides, it ain't doing no harm to no one anyhow.
That was the last word on the subject. Grandpa said no, so there it remained. There it has remained for 20 years since. It lasted through my grandfather's sudden heart attack, my grandmother's passing shortly thereafter of cancer, my father and mother's divorce, and my father's eventual death from drinking. It's been there, and it's been cursing my family's name. I knew it then, and I know it now. I inherited the property after my father passed away. He hadn't done anything with it during the time he had it, as he had been far too absorbed in drinking and wallowing at the time. So when I got to the place, it had fallen into total disrepair. It would take some work to make it livable again, but since my girlfriend Crystal and I had been looking for a bigger place for our family, it was something of a godsend. Our son Jeffrey was 4 years old, and I thought it would be great to give him a bigger room and a huge backyard to play in. We could finally even get a dog, something that I've always wanted to do, but the crummy apartments I'd lived in hadn't allowed it. I remember walking the grounds and planning everything out in my head, every color of paint and the scrap of wood I would need to get this place looking back up to the place I remembered from my childhood. Then I remembered seeing it off in the distance, like a blight on the horizon. Its clawed branches still reaching up towards the sky in prayer. Its body still rotting and twisted. I leaned up against the house and lit a cigarette while I stared at it off in the distance, like it was an intruder. I closed my eye and covered it with my thumb. The world looked better without it. I decided in that moment that while my grandpa may have wanted to just leave it be, I was cutting that fucker down. My girlfriend and I decided that I could spend the weekends up at my grandparents' place to get it fixed up for us the moment we move in. My brother Eddie offered to help out on the weekends. That he wasn't busy, of course, but said that wouldn't be for at least 2 weeks. I considered the idea of waiting to cut the tree down until my brother could get up there to give me a hand. But the second I laid my eyes on that thing again, I wanted it gone. I backed my truck up into the field to make it easier to haul out all the pieces of wood. As my chainsaw roared to life, in my head I could almost see the twisted thing cringe. It had stood for longer than I'd been alive. Today was its last time at prayer to the sky. I covered my face with a dust mask and felt a great satisfaction as the whirling teeth of the saw sank into its surface. Chips of blackened bark and rotted smelling sawdust flew free from its knotted, twisting trunk. Some sort of black sap leaked out onto my saw blade as I worked. I could even feel bits of it fly up and hit me in the face. Even through the dust mask, I could smell it. Its stench was horrid. I feared for a second it would gum up the works of my saw, but the raw power of the engine kept it moving forward, and the teeth of the chainsaw chewed their prey with little worry. It took them most of the day working to get the tree down and chopped into pieces. But as the sun was setting and the bed of my truck was filled with the black rotting wood, it felt worth the trouble. Left in the tree's place was nothing but a knotted up stump. The thing writhed with insects and some kind of mold. I would tear it out later when I had some help. Who knew how deep that thing had been rooted? I climbed into the cab of my truck, filthy and tired, yet satisfied with my work. That night I slept a dreamless sleep of the dead, knowing my horizon was free of that twisted shadow. I spent the whole next day working on the main house. There was a lot to do, and I didn't want to waste my time. It wasn't until the following weekend that things started to get strange. I had been clearing out in the attic of the house. It was filled with boxes of junk and old furniture. Most of the stuff was going straight to the dump. A few things to Goodwill, and at least a handful of things I was keeping. While I was moving one of the keeper boxes, a box filled with old photo albums. One of the albums fell out of the top and sent a loose picture sprawling across the floor. I set the box down into the guest bedroom, where I was planning to store for the time being, and walked over to pick up the photos. They were old black and white pictures of my grandfather when he was younger. He was standing in front of that horrid-looking tree smiling. My grandmother sat beside him at the base. Fall of 47 was written on the back, but below it was something much stranger. Lekala, we seek no end. The phrase struck a strangely familiar chord with me, although I had no idea what it had meant. The photo in of itself made me feel uncomfortable, though. There was something a little too manic in my grandfather's smile, and something a little too nervous in my grandmother's. I flipped to the next photo, and it took a second to realize what I was looking at. When I did, though, my stomach turned. It was my grandfather. This time, though, my grandfather was not in frame, and instead my grandfather was holding a rope that was slung up over the tree and pulling it taut. On the other end of the rope was a dog. It had been hung by the neck, presumably by my grandfather, and it appeared to be dead. My grandpa still had that manic smile on his face. You could see it beaming from beneath his wide brim hat. I dropped the photo, recoiling from what I had just seen. It was sick, and I couldn't hardly believe it. My grandparents had always been such kind people, and the sight of my grandfather taking such pleasure in killing a defenseless animal made me sick. I studied myself on my knees and saw the photo laying face down on the ground in front of me. It too had the writing on the back. Lekala, except the end of another. I snatched the photo up off the ground, not wanting to look at it again, and walked at a steady pace over to the trash pile I had been building up. I shoved the picture inside one of the boxes and then returned to where I had left the other photo albums and started tearing through them. I came across at least 10 other sets of photos from different years. Each time my grandfather and grandmother were in one picture posed next to the tree. Then each other time my grandfather was hanging some kind of animal by its neck from one of the branches. It wasn't always dogs. There were also cats and goats. Each one was labeled as fall of whatever year it had been taken, and each one had the same chant written in 2 parts. Lekala, we seek no end. Lekala, lekala, except the end of another. I tore each photo from the album and crumbled them up, stuffing them into the same box as the original ones I found. I must have paced in a silent shock for at least an hour afterwards. What had my grandparents been doing? Was it some kind of cult thing? Why did my grandfather always look like he was taking such pleasure in killing those animals? It started to make sense to me why that tree always felt so wrong, so evil. They had done something there that tainted that place. That night I threw the boxes in the back of my truck and dropped them off at the dump on my way home. For all I cared, they could rot with the tree. I wanted nothing to do with it. I thought that would be the end of it. I would walk away and leave it alone, just keep to myself and move on with my life. It's never that simple, though. I know that now. That whole week, I was plagued by nightmares about that tree. I could hear my grandfather's hearty laugh as he yanked down on a rope and pulled those animals up into the tree. I could hear them squeal and whine as they were strangled to death. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, short of breath and confused as to where I was. The phrase repeating in my head, lekala, lekala, we seek no end. Lekala, lekala, except the end of another. I told my girlfriend what they were, just nightmares, probably brought on by stress, but I never told her what was them about. I was hesitant to return to the house, but I told myself to just forget about it. It was disturbing to learn that my grandparents weren't the people I always thought they were, that they were capable of such disgusting acts of cruelty. But any answers to why had been buried them years ago. The tree was gone, the pictures gone with it, and the house was mine now. I could make it home again and fill it with new, happier memories. I met my brother Eddie at the house the following weekend as planned. My brother and I worked the next 2 following weekends without incident. It was good to spend time with him, as he was helping me get the house back into shape in no time. The 3rd weekend, I got there on a Saturday morning to find my brother staring off into the field. I walked up behind him and touched his shoulder. He jumped back, startled. "Jesus Christ, Danny, you scared the shit out of me," he said, seeming to snap out of his trance. Sorry about that. It looked like you were straight up zoned out, though. "Oh, yeah, just staring off into space." He laughed. "Guess I'm getting senile in my old age." "Yeah, 30 years old and all. We should probably get you ready for the retirement home." He snorted a quick laugh and gave me a playful punch to the shoulder before turning his attention back to the field. "Hey, didn't there used to be a tree out there?" he asked. "Gnarled old thing, really creepy looking?" My heart sunk in my chest. I had so much fun working on this place with him that I had not thought about the tree or the photos in the past week. Yeah, I cut it down. My tone became somber. I hoped that he wouldn't ask anything else, and I think he could see it on my face. Good riddance. That thing was hideous." He smiled at me. "Let's get back to work." We spent the rest of the day rebuilding the back deck that had been torn down the previous weekend. It had been overtaken with rot and was falling apart. During one of our smoke breaks, Eddie cracked a beer and handed it to me. I returned the favor by lighting a cigarette and passing it over to him. He took a drag and coughed a bit before taking a sip of his beer. "Don't you dare tell my wife I've been smoking," he said, sucking down another drag. "Marla would kill me." "My lips are sealed, brother." I laughed and lit one for myself. "So, Crystal and my nephew, are they coming up tomorrow?" "Yep. She wants to check out the place." And I'm tired of spending whole weekends away from my boy. It'll be good to show them around. I wasn't actually sure how much I meant that. The whole place still gave me a weird vibe I was doing my best to ignore. Yet in the back of my mind, it gnawed at me. This place always had a fucked up vibe when we were kids, huh? Eddie said, seemingly out of nowhere. He was staring at the backyard fence, as if he was looking through it towards the field. What are you talking about? I said before taking another swig of my beer and giving him a raised eyebrow over the bottom of my bottle. I don't know. He trailed off a bit before turning his attention towards me. I'm glad you're fixing it up, Danny. We both sat silently for a bit till we're almost done with our beers. My brother took down the final swallow out of his bottle and smacked his lips. Lekala, the end of another, he said before turning to me with a smile. I leapt out of my lawn chair and backed away from him. He just pulled a knife on me. Whoa, brother, a bee fly up your shorts? He said with a laugh. Why the fuck did you just say that? I was now standing behind the chair, using it as a barrier between him and me. 'Cause you jumped up like a maniac, he answered, taking a step towards me. Are you okay? Not the thing about the bee, you asshole. Why did you say that thing before? I stepped back, holding my beer bottle by the neck with a reverse grip. I said, that's the end of another break. What the fuck's gone into you? I used my stance and leaned myself on the back of my chair. Could I have been hearing things? It was possible. It felt as if that phrase had drilled itself into my mind. I decided that I may have just misheard and flipped out over nothing and felt stupid. As far as I knew, my brother didn't know anything about what went on here, and I wanted him to remain in ignorance. Nothing. I looked up at him and forced a smile. I think I've just been working too hard. My mind is starting to play tricks on me. One hell of a trick. His face was flushed with worry. I could tell he was genuinely confused. My heart slowed down and I finished the rest of my beer before walking over next to him and clapping him on the shoulder. Don't worry about it. My smile came easier now. Your little brother's just an idiot. Let's just get back to work. That's exactly what we did. We managed to get the whole back deck built over the course of the rest of the day. All the other breaks we took had an uneasy silence to them. I really just wanted to see Crystal and my son. I hoped it would make me feel less uneasy after my little delusion. Eddie blacked out on the couch shortly after we finished the day and fell asleep in the upstairs bedroom. I think I would have dreamed about the tree that night. In fact, I'm sure of it. That is, if my sleep hadn't been interrupted a little before 4 a.m. I woke up to a figure standing over the bed, just staring down at me. I was about to freak out and go scrambling for my grandpa's old 12 gauge in the closet, but my eyes quickly adjusted. It was Eddie. The look on his face made it seem as if all the life had been drained out of him. Eddie, I asked, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. What the hell are you doing? What's going on? Is everything all right? She breathes. She, beneath the tree, demands retribution for what you did. I raised an eyebrow at him. I felt utterly confused and still half asleep before I could ask what the fuck he meant, though he spoke again. Lekala. We should seek no end. I don't want her to have you, brother. I'm sorry. My stomach twisted, knots in my chest, and I threw back my covers to jump out of bed. Before my feet touched the ground, though, Eddie was on me with a strength I didn't know he had. He coiled around me like a snake, and I felt his forearm press into my neck like a vice. I gasped and threw elbows in an attempt to get myself free, but the more I struggled, the harder he squeezed. In no time at all, the world went dark. When I awoke again, I smelled earth and damp mold. Dim light crossed my fuzzy vision as I coughed and weakly attempted to raise to my knees. I could hear muffled sounds in the distance, Eddie's voice, and then crystals. I tried to call out to them, but all I could do was choke out a cough. I pushed myself to my feet, feeling as if I'd been crushed under a ton of bricks. My eyes started to adjust and clear, revealing that I was in the basement of the house. Suddenly I heard Crystal scream, an all too short scream, but before it was cut off by the sound of something thudding against the floor. This was followed by the sound of my son crying. My strength came back to me in that moment, and my legs carried me up the basement stairs as fast as they could. I could hear my son's cries dimming as they moved out to the front door of the house and out towards the field. I crashed into the basement door with all my weight, and as I shouted Eddie's name in a raspy breath, it felt like an eternity. And I wondered how the old door was withstanding my hits better than my shoulder. I finally heard the wood splinter after what felt like 10 straight minutes of crashing all my weight into it. And the sliding lock broke into pieces, letting the door swing free. With no hesitation, I threw myself around the corner and into the living room, where I saw Crystal lying unconscious on the floor. Her head was bleeding, but she was alive, and I needed to get my son. Eddie's words rung out in my mind. She beneath the tree demands retribution for what you did. Images of my brother hoisting my son up by his neck and smiling maniacally as he did it overtook my thoughts. Somehow I knew that's exactly what was going to happen too, which made no sense because I had cut down that tree into tiny fucking pieces. I reluctantly left Crystal and sprinted up to the stairs to get the shotgun from the closet. I wasn't going to take any chances, not when it came to my son. I passed the window that overlooked the field and I could see Eddie carrying Jeffrey out into the field. But I also saw something that froze my blood in its veins. I saw the tree, a silhouette of black against the overcast sky, its gnarled body and twisted branches reaching up in prayer, the same as it had always been. I didn't have time to wonder how. None of this made any sense, but I knew what was about to happen to my son. I hurriedly grabbed the shotgun and made sure it was loaded, and sprinted from the house. They had reached the tree before I got to them. Eddie had slung the rope over one of the thicker branches and looped it around Jeff's neck. Before I could even level the gun in Eddie's direction, he had thrown the rope over his shoulder and began lifting Jeffrey up by his neck. I lifted the double barrel and pointed it directly at my brother. "Let him down! Now!" I screamed, my voice still raspy and paining my throat with each word. "I'm doing this for you, brother. Lekala. I don't want your end." He wasn't smiling like I'd seen in my mind. Tears streamed down his face. "She demands your blood. This is the only way." "I'm not going to say it again." I stepped closer to him. There was no chance of missing. I pulled the hammers of both barrels back. I could see Jeffrey's feet kicking wildly in the air. One of his little shoes went tumbling to the ground. "Let him down!" Now the tears were mine. It felt like some compulsion to pull the trigger had taken me over. I could hear a woman's voice in my head. "Lekala. do it. It was little more than a whisper, but it was there behind my thoughts. I stared up at the tree, feeling exactly like the first time, in the grip of true fear. She needs a sacrifice from you, my brother screamed, his face and voice twisted in madness. Lekala, 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 except the... His voice was cut off by the thunderous sound of the shotgun as I squeezed the triggers. I don't remember much after that. Not much more than bits and pieces. I remember scooping my screaming child off the ground and carrying him back towards the house. I remember Crystal running towards me and tearing him from my arms with a confused look in her eye. I remember collapsing before the police and ambulance got there. Crystal said they couldn't question me because apparently I kept saying that it shouldn't be there and that I cut it to pieces. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth about the tree, though. As far as she or anyone else knows, my brother went mad. I wish I could believe that was true. It would make me feel like less of a piece of shit for dragging his name through the mud after I murdered him. Make no mistake either. That's exactly what I did. There were no other ways I could have stopped him. I thought, though, all of the 100 times I tell myself the reason I pulled the trigger was because I was in a panic. Not in the right sense of mind. I know, though, it was she beneath the tree, as Eddie had called her. She got her sacrifice from me, in both blood and humanity. I never bothered to cut the tree down again. In fact, I decided to let the old place rot. I refused to even sell it, and I sure as hell will never go back there. I keep hoping it'll burn down in some freak accident. I know it won't, though. Hell, even if it did, that fucking tree would still be there. Gnarled and twisted branches reaching up towards the sky in praise to whatever power it serves. How's my complexion? That pale, huh? I bet I look like a ghost. I'm still in shock. I think, at least. I feel like I bled out 10 gallons. I'm sorry to ramble, it's just that what's the word for it? Detached? Strange feeling. Seen it enough times in the field. After all I've been through, I figured if I was ever going to experience it myself, that I would have just experienced it by now. I feel like I'm floating outside my own body. Just cut the cord and I'd float away. Did you see the crime scene? No. Do yourself a favor. Don't even look at the pictures. Don't even touch the file. You'll thank me later. I can't get my knees to stop rattling. That's why you're holding on to your coffee like that? I'm shaking the table, aren't I? Hold on a second. Let me back my chair up. There, that's better. No, I'm still not interested in an attorney. I mean, yes, I'm waiving my right. Sorry.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right. Let the record show that Detective Hobson Millgate, retired, has waived his right to an attorney.
I won't need a lawyer after the DA stops puking and considers taking it public. There's no way they're showing that to a jury. There's nothing harder than mercy. Sometimes. I did what I had to do. It just happened to be hard and ugly.
Are you hungry?
No. I think I'd just puke up again if you gave me anything.
Are you ready to begin?
No, but I'm ready as I'll ever be.
What led you to the crime scene on the night in question?
Would you believe I was planning a fishing trip before all this started? Never mind. It was a reporter, name of Stacy Bamer. She contacted me a week ago by email and claimed she had new information on the Driscoll murders. I was the lead investigator, and I'm sure you know the case had gone unsolved for 20 years. Case was cold as ice. I thought it was a gag at first. You know how that can be. Most of the time it's not even on purpose. Everyone thinks they know something that'll crack the case wide open. The Driscoll murders were a big story around these parts. Over the years, I must have gotten a couple hundred fake leads. I handed the investigation over to Detective Warren Carroll when I retired. But I didn't want him to be bothered with any fake bullshit. I know he's busy with all the new gang activity that's been going on. Since she contacted me, I figured I'd check it out for him as a courtesy. I wasn't expecting to go anywhere. I met her for lunch at Purry's Cafe. She was a good-looking blonde gal, so she didn't fit the typical profile of a hoaxer. Not that I put too much faith in profiles, after 40 years at least. She also might have been one of those creepy gals that gets off on death. God knows I've dealt with enough of those. She seemed normal enough, but I still thought she might be pulling my leg, or maybe she had been fooled too. But she had a file with her. It contained what appeared to be a confession by the Driscoll. Well, he wasn't a murderer, was he? I really do wish he had been, you know? It would have been so much better for everyone.
Can you please fill us in on the relevant details of the Driscoll case?
Let's see. It would have been 20 years ago now. As I've said, 20 years ago there was a disappearance. Thinking of all those years, 20 goddamn years, that's a long time.
Take your time, Hob.
Thanks. The Driscolls were a family of 6 out in the suburbs, upper middle class. Father was an attorney, mother ran her own business selling pottery out of her house. Even had her own kiln. 4 children, all high school age and below. Good kids, honor roll, no criminal records to speak of. The oldest son was caught smoking dope at his high school once, but nothing much besides that, just the typical stuff you find when you look at people too closely. They disappeared October 13, 1994. No trace was found of the bodies. That's why the press went crazy with it. You still see it show up on some of those unsolved murder shows. Our family disappeared and no one saw a thing. No one knew where they went. A neighbor lodged a sound complaint, which is how we found the scene. There was an alarm going off and the neighbor called it in. Figured it might have been a fire when no one answered the door. The patrolman went in to investigate. There were obvious signs of a struggle in the youngest daughter's bedroom. The bed had been flipped over and the sheets were torn. We found elevated concentrations of carbon monoxide in the fabric of all the bed sheets except the youngest daughter's. The alarm was a carbon monoxide detector, which is how we knew to look. The neighbor indicated the sound had been going on for over a day. He had been unable to get anyone to answer the door during that time. We also found several aluminum canisters and some hoses in a dumpster a few blocks away. At the time, we assumed the Driscolls had been gassed and disposed of at a different location, excepting, of course, the daughter who woke up in the end of everything and put up a struggle. The investigation gave no leads. Of course, our first thought was that the father did it. We checked it out, but he didn't have any motive, no leads to check out. Same with the mother, surviving family checked out clean too. The father had a few clients who might have had motive, but the means weren't there. He was a divorce lawyer, but not for anybody who had been taken out of entire family without leaving any evidence. There was a chemistry teacher who lived 3 blocks away, and we investigated him for a while because of the canisters, but he alibied out. Same with the dentist who lived nearby. The wife had an online flirtation with some kid out in England, but nothing adulterous, and he wasn't even in the country at the time of the murder. We settled, unhappily, on the idea of a random killing. Hardest pieces of shit to catch. He must have sunk tens of thousands of man-hours into this case, tracking down leads. The canister had been stolen from a laboratory 10 miles away. There was no security footage. We couldn't find any leads on the thief. After more than 6 months of the investigation went cold. The Driscolls had been knocked out and abducted. Like I said, no one ever found the bodies. Who would say they just hadn't run off? Until, well, you know the rest of that. I'd rather only talk about that once.
What can you tell us about how the confession wound up with Miss Bamer?
She'd been following the case for some years, both personally and as a reporter. Like I said, it captured the imagination of a lot of people. Even seemingly normal folks that thought it could have been aliens, ghosts, or demons. Miss Baber published a retrospective on the murders given the 20-year anniversary. It caused a renewed interest, which happened from time to time. As usual, I declined to comment, citing lack of new evidence. I remembered her asking for a quote, though, which is why I accepted the lunch meeting. After publication of the article, Ms. Bamer claimed that she had been sent a file. She wished to have me authenticate it. The most pertinent part of the file was a confession. I assured Ms. Bamer that such false documents are not uncommon, especially on older cases like this, and that I'd personally heard 24 confessions of the Driscoll murders. She was insistent. Once I felt she wasn't trying to pull off a hoax or getting off on the idea of talking about a murder, I agreed to the meeting. She stated it had been mailed to her in the same envelope she showed to me when we met for the lunch. Can you describe the contents? Old newspaper clippings outlining the progress of my investigation. They seemed appropriately yellowed, so I'd guess they were from the trophy book of the perpetrator. There were also 6 photos alleging to be of the individual members of the Driscoll family, as well as several other photos of the facility where they had been taken. My hands won't stop shaking. See? I'm trying as hard as I can. I just can't make it happen. I'll have to ask the paramedic for a sedative when I'm done with this statement. I don't think I'll be able to sleep otherwise. No, I'm fine for now. I don't want anything to interfere with my recollection of the events for your recording. Just carrying it around in my head like sorry. I'll stay focused. The photos were of the Driscoll family. Of course, at the time I didn't know that. The photos had been aged poorly and they could have been of anyone. It was very hard to distinguish features, however, given the elaborate nature of the file. I figured it did warrant a further investigation. As to the confession letter, well, it was brief. It gave me an address. That's the first thing I noticed. I couldn't locate the address online, which meant it had to be old. The confession letter said, "Stop printing lies. I never killed anyone. It just took a while to get them ready for breakfast." There was no signature included. I just remembered something. God damn it. We got sent a breakfast menu a month after the disappearance. Someone had drawn a red circle around a picture of pancakes. The letter said, "They're not dead, they're getting ready for breakfast." We put it in the junk lead file. God.
Detective Milgate, do you need a minute?
I'll have to ask the paramedic for the sedative when I'm done with the statement. Can you make sure they're ready with one? It's going to be rough. We did try to track down that menu. We could never find out where it had come from. It wasn't any place local. The identifying information had been cut out.
Why did you decide to personally investigate the location mentioned in the letter?
I wanted to make sure it wasn't a hoax. I still wasn't convinced. I've had 20 years of people sending me fake evidence. I guess maybe the case captured my imagination too. I always imagined one day I'd think of something I'd overlooked and solve the whole thing. It felt unbelievable to have someone dump the whole thing in my lap. I needed to see with my own two eyes. Miss Bamer had pinpointed the location with city records, but neither of us was sure it was still there. It was an abandoned industrial building. The last time it had a valid mailing address was 50 years ago. It might have caved in for all we knew. I think I also wanted to be the one to crack it. Whether or not it was dumped in my lap, that case has hung over my head for 20 years. Miss Bamer and I agreed to meet there the following morning.
Can you describe the scene?
Yes. It was an industrial building, as I stated, approximately 120 feet long by maybe 45 feet wide. It was a wooden structure, and at first the conditions seemed to match the neighboring buildings. However, I noticed the facade had been recently patched in a few locations. Further investigation also revealed that the entrance had been chained and locked. My understanding was that it used to be a sheet metal shop, at least. Excuse me. Is there a bucket? I might vomit. Thank you. Sorry. I thought I was empty. No, I want to get this done with. Then I'm going to want that sedative. I could smell something from inside the building, very faintly. I figured that would count as probable cause, not that I needed it as a civilian, but you never forget the way a corpse smells. They were bad enough that they had that same smell. I hadn't forgotten how to pick a lock, so I let myself in. You know, I really do wish they had been corpses. I really do wish she had been a serial killer. I really do. Do you believe me? Please say you believe me. I do. Can you describe the interior of the building? I'm trying to focus through this. I really am. I'm sorry. It's just that I'd like to go to sleep after this for a very long time. Is that paramedic here? Is that sedative ready? Thank God. The warehouse had not been as abandoned as we were previously led to believe. The interior had a hallway with 6 rooms. The construction was old but visibly newer than the rest of the building. The walls between each room had been soundproofed. There were no windows to the outside or doorways between the rooms themselves. The only access was through the hallway. I tried to make Miss Bamer leave at that point. The smell was stronger inside. The rooms contained presses, hydraulic presses, 4 foot by 8 foot, custom presses. I couldn't figure out what they were at first because they were hovering over what looked like hospital beds. There were IV bags in each room as well as other medical equipment. That's how he kept them alive for so long. Of course. I think I'm seeing spots. Do you need to take a break? The idea of having to start this again is worse than the idea of finishing it. Then please, describe your next course of action. The building was obviously an active crime scene. I had no doubt at this point. I was in the lair of what I believed to be a serial killer. I tried to tell Ms. Bamer to leave several times. She refused on the grounds that it would not be right to leave me on my own. There wasn't much time to make an issue out of it. My opinion of her was that she was a bit nosy but basically alright, and I didn't think she'd be a liability if she stayed out of my way. I had to make a judgment call as to whether or not I should proceed on my own in case the family was somehow impossibly still alive and perhaps in danger, or if I should leave and call for backup. I had told my wife where I was going previously, so I knew my absence would be noted and reported if the worst happened. Neither of us could get cell reception here. Sorry, I'm rambling. It was then that I heard, not even a gasp. It was like a gasp, but not really. I don't want to describe it any more than that. There was a sound, it drew my attention further on. I had to act. That's all that mattered. There were some stairs at the very far end of the warehouse descending into a basement. I told Miss Bamer to remain behind and pulled my service revolver. I had a flashlight on my person as well and turned it on as I descended into the basement. The basement had been hand dug, maybe even over the course of the entire 20-year disappearance. I don't know. The floor was dirt and there was a tunnel that retreated back far enough that it had to be supported with struts at regular intervals. When my flashlight first illuminated the stack, I wish they were dead. I wish he had been a serial killer. Please, take a moment. After I recovered, my first thought was, thank God they're all dead. How am I supposed to go on with my life after this? I'm 64 years old, for Christ's sake. I'm not a young man who can forget things anymore. When you're young, you have this sense that you're invincible, but I don't have that to protect me anymore. Look at me whining. When they had that done to them, it's my fault. I should have found them, saved them somehow. I'm sorry, Hob. I've got to ask. Can you describe the scene? Yeah. I can. I didn't know what I was looking at first. Hell, I still don't. It was a stack, maybe 2 feet thick. From the stink and the coloring, it was obviously made of flesh. I thought maybe he'd hacked them up and stacked them up in pieces. That would have been bad enough. The first thing that alerted me to the truth was the eyeball. On the top of the stack was a perfectly round eyeball in the middle of a socket that had been distorted to the size of a saucer. That's when I realized what I was looking at was 20 goddamn years of torture, basically. He had the entire Driscoll family under those presses for 20 years, keeping them alive on IV drip, increasing the pressure on them so very slowly that their bodies had time to adapt, until they had flattened like pancakes. He squished them by about 1/4 of an inch every year for 20 years. They'd been pulled them out. Then he pulled them out when they were too broken and wretched to move, without any chance of recovery, and stacked them on top of each other. I've got no idea what for. I don't want to know. And I was still thinking, thank God they're all dead, when the one on the top started gasping again. What did he say, Hob? Nothing at first. It couldn't speak without help. I think it would have been Avery Driscoll. Not that I could tell much about the gender or the age, but the hair was blonde where there was hair. The head was a mess of scars. I think the son of a bitch who did this must have removed parts of their skull. I've got no idea how he got their heads so flat otherwise. Not as flat as the rest of their bodies, but flat. How the hell, who the hell knows how their brains handled that? Their lips were punctured by teeth everywhere. After the presses had flattened out their noses, I guess. Avery was 14 when he disappeared. I've stopped shaking. Goddamn weird the way our bodies works, isn't it? What else? There was a machine, a sort of pump. I followed the hose with my flashlight and realized everyone in the stack was hooked up to the pump. I don't think They could breathe on their own. You see, not after a while. There simply wasn't enough volume for their lungs to inflate. There was some sort of opening cut right into each of their chests. There was a switch on the pump. I don't know why I pressed it. I was in a panic. I wanted to do something. Maybe some stupid part of me thought that if I switched it on, they would inflate and be okay. I switched it. It increased the volume of air to the topmost hose. I could hear the pump working harder. Which is when Avery Driscoll started to scream. He begged me to kill him. He said other things too. He didn't make much sense. He was in pain, and I would hope he had gone insane several years previously. Oh my God, Hob. My thoughts exactly. I didn't know what to do. He wouldn't stop screaming. I believed he was convinced I was his torturer. A closer look at his eye revealed that he was mostly a mess of white scar tissue. He was as blind as a bat. You know, I spoke with some burn victims once. They told me that they managed to find meaning and purpose again after a while. I don't know how anyone in the Driscoll family could have done that. I stated my name. I told him I was a detective. I told him I was there to help. I repeated it over and over again, knowing, of course, there was nothing that anyone anywhere could do to help. Miss Bamer arrived, drawn by the sound. Before she saw the stack, she told me that I had screamed and she had come to help. But I don't remember having done so. Nevertheless, she arrived. Then she saw the stack and screamed, but I was intent on Avery Driscoll. He was able to hear. He became lucid for a moment. It was a strain to understand what he said, but I will never forget. And I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it.
Please, kill me. It hurts. I don't want to be a monster. Please kill me. Tell my family that I died a long time ago. I don't know if they're still looking for me. Don't let them know what happened to me. Please, just kill me.
He could still cry, and he did. Although his tear ducts were too deformed for it to be noticeable. I should have forced Miss Bamer to leave. That is the only action in the matter which I regret more than failing to solve the case 20 years ago. Not just for her own sake, but for what she did next. I don't think she could have wounded them any more deeply if she tried. She took away the last comfort any of them in that stack had. You see, they had not been able to speak to another for 20 years. She said, "That's all of them, isn't it? That's the entire Driscoll family. They're all alive in there. The whole family." For 20 years, each member of the Driscoll family had been unaware that their fellow inmates were the other members of their family. They'd been holding out hope their family was okay. All been dreaming someone out there loved them and was free from suffering. Do you know what the screams of 6 people tortured over 2 decades, smashed down to the width of 4 inches, sounds like when they're all stacked on top of another? It sounds like the gates of hell opening up.
I think that's enough, Detective Milgate.
Not yet. I shot them. Mercy is hard, but I owed it to them. I am the only one that failed to save them. It only took 1 bullet to go through all of them. I emptied my revolver to make sure they didn't linger, to give them that final peace. It was the only kindness I had given them. We left and called for backup after that. Neither Miss Bamer nor I wished to remain with the bodies. I elected not to follow the crime scene investigators back into the basement. I asked if I could make my statement and leave after one of them saw what I had seen. They agreed. Can I have that sedative now?
Yes, Jesus, of course.
Thank you. Please, show in the paramedic. I'll roll up my sleeve. My wife has diabetes, so I'm aware of the procedure. Oh, and please, make sure you have the same courtesy available for Miss Bamer. She seemed to have it worse off than me. Poor woman couldn't even throw up or cry.
Of course, Hob. Do you know where she is now? She told the lead crime scene she was going home, but we haven't been able to reach her.
Did you try the paper?
Which paper was that, Hob?
The Daily World.
Are you sure? There is no Stacy Bamer on staff with the Daily World.